Budgets are moral documents. They reveal our nation's priorities and provide an insight into our soul. And this year, despite a growing economy and a return to surplus, Australian aid has been kept at its least generous level ever.
Australian aid matters because it saves and improves the lives of literally millions of men, women and children, and it's something that we as a nation can be proud of. It educates girls, it immunises babies, and it responds with emergency supplies during natural disasters and so much more.
But since 2013, the Coalition have made more than $11 billion worth of cuts to Australian aid. It's taken us to our least generous level ever as a nation. Australia will give just 0.21% of its gross national income to combating poverty worldwide. That's just 21 cents in every $100 our nation makes.
To put this into perspective, Australian aid was at the most generous levels ever in the 1960s, and that was under a Liberal Party government who gave 0.48% of gross national income to Australian aid. But as you can see, it's been a disappointing story for aid since then, with some small increases, but some even bigger cuts.
But what is really concerning about this budget is we are cutting support to our poorest neighbours at the same time we are facing some of the biggest global challenges ever. Rising conflict has left 65 million refugees displaced. For the first time in decades, global hunger is actually increasing instead of decreasing due to a rising number of natural disasters. And there are more slaves in the world today than ever before in human history. The global challenges we face requires global cooperation to solve. And those most affected by these crises, like children in poor communities, are counting on us to do our part.
So after 27 years straight of economic growth, where do you think Australia ranks in its generosity among aid-giving nations? I'll tell you, we're not third, or fourth, or fifth. We're not even in the top 10. In fact, we're right down at number 19. That places us firmly in the bottom half of the global ladder. And with this latest budget, our ranking is set to fall even lower.
This budget, there has been a lot of talk of things like low wage growth, the low New Start allowance, the continued effect of drought on our rural communities. These are real issues facing Australian citizens. But whilst we consider the impact of high energy prices, we must remember that for millions of the poor around the world, they are barely hanging on to survival, living in mud huts or under no roofs at all. We can be sure that if we cut Australian aid, lives will be lost. We have to ask ourselves as Christians, what kind of neighbour do we want to be to the world's poor?
The Bible doesn't specify the exact level of aid we should give, but it does talk to our hearts and our duty. In books like Isaiah, Proverbs and elsewhere, we are called to speak up for those that cannot speak for themselves. We are called to respond to the widow, to the orphan and to the refugee in need. We know as Christians that our role is not to stand and criticise the government, but that we have a duty in our churches and in our own lives to be generous with all that we have been given first and foremost.
But at Micah, we do believe we have a prophetic role to call on our nation's leaders and to ask them to act justly and to love mercy, to consider all that we've been blessed with in this nation and to ensure we are being a blessing to our vulnerable neighbours in return. That's why at Micah, we believe that it is time to restore Australian aid, and we are asking you to join us.